I was programming Croy about the time of the corporate change, and we had a couple of ratings books where we actually did all right, playing a little more modern rock, and then the change happened, and consultants started to be the word you heard. Everybody hired a consultant to come in and do one thing or another. They turned Earth rock into disco, and the consultant came to KZAP, and the stuff they were playing at first, I thought, they have no idea what this market wants, and I was feeling kind of cocky, but within just a few months, they got it fine-tuned, and their rating books just started going through the roof, and I guess they stayed pretty strong until the end, didn't they? I mean, KZAP wasn't a loser.
Oh, God, no. No, KZAP was like the #1 radio station when I got to town, and it just stayed that way for a decade. It started to get frayed a little bit towards the end because there were some people were coming at us from different angles. There was like 98 Rock, which I think was originally 93 Rock, came in, and they were sort of like taking the younger crowd, and so a lot of the newer music we were playing, they were siphoning that off. And then the Eagle came in with classic rock for the top end. And there's KZAP kind of in the middle, and it lost its identity that way, you know. So when the ratings did go down, I'd say in the last year or two.
Yeah.
But up until then, it was absolutely dominant in the marketplace. Absolutely.
What was some of the new stuff that you played at the end of KZAP? Like, I'm trying to picture where that is. Like, or is that early?
Picture 80s rock, early, you know, I mean, some of the you know, at the time, a new band would be like the Police, I guess, or something. You know, it went through that whole Sick Flock of Seagulls thing. I hated that period of time. That was, you know, Tears for Fears and stuff, which isn't bad music, but you see, again, you're stretching yourself a little thin if you're playing Tears for Fears, and you're trying to position yourself over here, but, you know, the core of your audience is still over here.
Well, you were getting into REM and U2 and Delamitri. And
yeah, not that it was bad stuff or anything. It was just, you know, it seems to me you want to follow the bulge of people that started here. As they get older, that's who you really want to be. I don't know, that kind of idea. So maybe that's what the Eagle was thinking when they came on with classic rock. You know, okay, this is for people really 60s, 70s based music. But even the Eagle plays a lot of 80s and even 90s stuff. You know, so I don't know what the form is anymore. The form is to get a good mix of good things going. You know, that's it.
Back in the 70s, we were really a local. It wasn't corporate, it wasn't reaching out very far, although Zachary reached out to, in a way, fairly far. But that t-shirt right there reminds me that we got a lot of our talent locally, and that came from KERS at Sac State and KDBS in Davis. A lot of air talent and concert venues, and all that had to do with a real local presence that didn't pull from the outside. Bill Graham liked working with us, again, because we weren't in competition with what he was doing in San Francisco. So.
And he was booking a lot of shows in town.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
By then, yeah.
Can I tell one of my favorite
Sure.
KZAP stories?
Sorry, you're out of time.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
spot break coming
we'll
up.
gather out in front.
Hot break, yeah.
One of my all-time favorite KZAP stories. It's very much of the first year. David Turner is on the air, and his guest in studio is Country Joe McDonald to do an interview and to sing some music. And Country Joe, I guess this must have been 69, maybe 70, had just come back from Europe where he had recorded the soundtrack to a film based on Henry Miller's Quiet Nights in Clichy. It's Henry Miller. And so there was about 6 of us in the studio, and everyone decided to drop acid. Now, I didn't drop that night, but, you know, Joe and David and Noreen and Taft, maybe, Jock Taft. But anyhow, most everyone except me, I think, dropped some acid. So they're doing the thing, and they're interviewing, and David finally says, well, you know, you want to play some music? And he goes, sure, what do you want to hear? And he goes, well, whatever you want to play, you can play anything you want. And Country Joe kind of got a gleam in his eye, and he goes, anything I want? Yeah. So he proceeded to play like 4 or 5 songs, very graphic sexual songs, from the soundtrack to Quiet Nights in Clichy, Henry Miller stuff, you know. And there was actually, you know, a father of children. Oh, I've got children. And he complained to the FCC, and they did a whole investigation. It was in the papers and all this stuff. And kind of like George Carlin in a way. And finally, about a year later, they wrapped up the investigation, and they wrote us a letter and said, don't do that again. but if you do it after 10 o'clock. Okay. And another thing that a lot of people don't know this, WKRP in Cincinnati was based on KZAP. A woman came to work at the station, worked in the news department for several months, like 4 or 5 months.
With her husband.
Oh, with her
Partner
husband?
at the time, yeah.
Oh,
Rick
okay.
Beeben and Judith Nielsen.
Okay. And I don't know what their motivation was, but anyhow, they made notes. And when they left the station, they go down to Hollywood and they write the pilot for WKRP in Cincinnati. And it went
They had
on.
already been involved in television. They wrote some of the Barney Miller shows. They did news at KZAP. I don't know that they had any really ulterior motives. I think they just left, realized what they had as a memory and being a part of, and kind of put that together since they were in a sitcom business anyway. How can we get a group of people to interact and have fun with it? Oh, it's a radio station with an all-night guy and
wacky.
and a beautiful secretary, and
There was
just
enough.
like KZAP.
There was enough of truth in that. They had a consultant, obviously. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
They had somebody that was Radio Works because they got so much of it right.
Yeah, they did,
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
Well, they were there.
An ad salesman with like loud suits, like.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we had
Not-
And, yeah.
hip.
Oh,
By
absolutely.
then, yeah.
Oh, yeah. In the 70s.
Oh, Spade Cooley.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, he took that name on, if you can believe it.
Spade.
Remember
Cooley.
him?
Yeah,
He
sure.
was Herb Tarlick.
But Don Early was the
was another
big
guy that-
ad salesman for KZAP. He was a really cool guy, so.
Oh, Don Early,
Don
yeah,
Early, yeah.
yeah. He got what we were doing and turned down stuff. He ran anything risky by the programming department. Do you really want to be the voice of this particular product or this event or whatever? He was a major part of what made it work in the 70s. As things were getting a little more focused from the absolute anything goes to pretty much mostly anything goes. When people read about that, and they get the idea that it went from just absolutely no boundaries or to a lot of boundaries. And really there were a few boundaries, but it had to do more with playing enough of what might keep people there. Certainly not singles, certainly anything pretty much off an album. But what we tried to do with the format, especially when New Day took over in '73, was kind of do stuff that would guarantee that a certain amount of new stuff got played and a certain amount of old stuff got played and a certain amount of stuff in the middle and a certain amount of experimental stuff. What kind of reaction do you get when you play something like that? So we had like a color-coded psychedelic-looking library where the oldies were anything pretty much before KZAP went on the air, and then it just kind of moved forward from that. But still, anybody could do what they wanted to do if they got an idea about how to put something together. And as Jeff was saying, the whole thing had to do with music. We had to be credible. We could do great public affairs and great public service and great ads and news and all that stuff, but it really all boiled back down to the music and how it got put together. And the people there had to know enough music to relate it somehow. And it could have been, Nina Simone against Emmylou Harris, but it had to work. The segue was what I was in it for.
And so you barely made that segue.
But
you made
often
it.
enough, I did, and so did everybody else. It's certainly not just me, but that's what it had to do with, is putting it together. Jeff made a good point earlier tonight about how we all learned from Donahue and KMPX and KSAN, but he said it, and I realized it at the time. They were a little less interested in the flow, and we're not talking beats per minute had to be matched up. It could be a theme, it could be a key, it could be a rhythm, it could be anything, but it had to make sense being put together. And we were more
we were
open
more
to
focused.
that and able to do that because we valued what that did to the ear when you were listening to the,
Yeah,
to
the
the
seamless
music.
flow.
Then they really were.
Cosmic.
And everyone who
Yeah.
was on the air was good at that
Yeah.
and prided ourselves on that, to the point that, you're playing a song, and you just make it up as you go on. You're playing a song, and you go, what would be the
Yeah.
perfect song after this? And
You'd
can't-
have 5
I
minutes
can't-
to figure it out.
And
you
then,
can see
and then
it.
the song, and we start to come to an end and be like 30 seconds ago, what is it? And you know what? On more than 100 occasions, what happens is the song starts to fade out, you lift the needle up, you put it about a minute and a half back into the song, and you just let it play until you come up with the inspiration of what's the perfect song to go after this song.
I never thought of that.
We did it all the time.
I never thought of that.
KZAP in about 81, which is well in the corporate era, but it seemed like late at night, I was a kid who stayed up late at night a lot listening to KZAP, seemed like that was where the format had more play than during the day.
Traditional radio is looser later at night, yeah.
Were they allowed that, Bob? At that could have been.
Yeah. Yeah, there were adjustments that were made, but it's so much how you perceive it. I mean, people will come up and go, "Man, Bob, you play the best music of anybody at the radio station." And I'm thinking, we're all really playing the same music here. So what the challenge, state of the art for my business is to make it sound like A, you did it, B, you're really having a good time doing it, C, this is my idea, But that's really, a lot of that is and if you do it, if you know your job and you can do this kind of work, it comes off feeling very natural, I mean, I would say 90% of what I play, I like. I mean, I've heard it a million times, but I like it. So there's nothing, clawing at me that I have to do that way. So, you make it interesting for the listener. You think, well, okay, here's somebody who probably hasn't heard it a million times, or maybe if they did, not a million times this week.
I got a question for you. Is the listener, though, dramatically different than when you started in the business? I mean, in the evolution of listening now.
Yeah. People use radio differently now. Radio is just another quick little music entertainment source, like so many things, iPods or whatever, you got a million. But back in Robert's day and Jeff's day, and even when I was doing it, talking about back in '73, I was working at a station that was WKRP, a little AM station. Yeah, absolutely. The listeners are different then because the radio was a communal campfire, it was like the gathering place of ideas and people and friends and familiar voices and so it was really kind of a community anchor, which was KZAP. I mean, it was a community anchor. And plus, the best part about a station like KZAP early on, and all those other stations I mentioned, was that people who it showed you that, hey, I'm not alone in this thing. There's a whole community of freaks just like me that are having a good time and understand the aesthetic. And that's what we're talking about. It's the aesthetic. And so, yeah, it was used differently, so the listeners had different expectations, and we were all different people back then. I mean, basically. Yes?
Were the the early stages of KZAP, any of that stuff archived?
You mean air checks?
Mhm.
Sound? You mean recordings of
Yeah.
people
Not
talking?
available.
I've never seen
I
it.
mean, did you guys record any of
A few.
I've got boxes of stuff.
And
Real.
the rock-
Reel-to-reel tape?
Yep.
But I'd like to know something, Robert, because in those days, an air check was the breaks, just the announcements you made to try to get a better job somewhere else. So I had like several reels.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just not the music. I can announce, it's in me announcing what we just played and what we're going to play. So do you have like flowing
Oh, yeah.
hours?
I have
hours?
my last
I'd love to
shows,
see it,
Yeah.
We do have
do.
stuff like that. We don't have that particular thing in the Rock and Radio Museum. We've got bits and pieces of memorabilia, but tape's hard to come by.
I've got a lot of shows, a lot of production reels.
Yeah, I have spots. A lot of
Well,
spots.
Well, you're an archivist,
Well, no,
Dennis is. I mean,
Porter.
there's no piece of sound that's been recorded in modern times that Dennis doesn't
Not
have a
true.
copy, at least
Not
one
true.
copy in his basement somewhere.
I'm curious about the origin
The cat, I wish Roger could be here. Roger lived at the N Street house, right?
Mhm.
And KZAP just hit on him to do some art.
Yeah, Roger Shepard did a lot of the artwork for KZAP early on, before New Day and after. A lot of the concert posters, a lot of the logos.
That is actually not this is not the original cat. Roger's was a little different. It was on some bus sides and a few other ad pieces. And then Gordo's brother, Bill Styler, got a hold of it and did this, which of course people still ask us about, do you have any old KZAP stickers? It was a great sticker and it lasted for a long time.
I think the very first poster Roger Shepard ever designed was the Incredible String Band
In
at
Davis.
which is produced by KZAP. Not like a joint presents with a company, but the staff. We paid the band and we put on the show.
When we get the museum open again, you can see a lot of Roger's work. He probably did 50 pieces around.
There's an exhibit, or was an exhibit at the California Museum. I did a video blog piece on it.
It's there till next month.
The posters from the Valley.
Mhm.
I mean, San Francisco style rock posters, but for things that were going on around here by local guys. Right?
Yeah, Roger's got half a dozen things. It's
California
the California
Museum.
Museum, the one that Maria Shriver kind of got going again.
Archives.
Yeah, well, it's not the archives. It's the same building, I think, but it's 10th and
It is.
10th and O.
10th and O, yeah.
It's still
Thank
there.
you.
California
Going on?
Museum. I think it's there for another half a month or so.
Yeah.
Worth seeing. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about women in the early days of KZAP. Particularly, I was curious if there were ever a female.
Oh, they were always hanging around.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
KZAP's original staff had women, right? Which was
Well, not the very first staff.
close.
Noreen and
Zoe.
and Helen Moline.
Helen Moline.
Yeah.
So-
Well, before that, there was Tasha, there was
Oh,
Zoe.
Oh, Zoe.
People reacted really weird when we put a woman on the air, and we couldn't figure out why, because she knew her music, whoever it was. Zoe Riddle, I think, was probably the first woman on the air,
Yeah, she was.
and she knew how to do it.
There was resistance from the audience.
Was
A
it?
little bit, right?
Really?
It
Can't
was different. It was kind of groundbreaking, you know.
But our news department always featured women.
Yes.
We had women's programming on as public
Yes.
affairs programs. Viola Weinberg was at KZAP for a long time and did, she was poet laureate in Sacramento for a few years, a little while back. But her history is at KZAP doing news, doing public affairs, doing interviews. She did a great interview with Dolly Parton once in the newsroom, where Dolly actually lifted part of her wig up to show Viola, see, I'm just like everybody else. Anyway,
Yeah, right. Of course you are.
one of the things that KZAP, I think, was always kind of in the front lines, especially early on, is that kind of discrimination just didn't matter. It was somebody else's issue. If we heard somebody who should be on the air, they were on the air, and that included women.
That said, though, if you were opening your mail with air checks, if you were the program director, there was a ton more guys trying to get jobs than there were women.
The women that ended up on KZAP were local. We knew them. They were hanging around. It wasn't something that a tape was sent in from Boise and this sounds great and let's hire this person. It's all people we knew.
But
the
that was
first-
the natural way to get
first
on
8 years or
KZAP
so.
the first
Yeah.
few years.
Know
Is
somebody.
just hang around with us and get to know people individually and express an interest, and then you get a chance to do a shift and try out.
That's how it worked for me.
I wanted to come visit Robert. I had met him at Sac State, didn't know him very well, but I wanted to come up to the control room and hang out. Nobody would answer the phone in the lobby. Nobody would let me up. I couldn't get up. So I parked my car in the alley of the Elks building, climbed on the roof, jumped on the fire escape, climbed up 13 floors and went in the window. Just walked down the hall and hi Robert, how are you? And I sit down and we're talking for a while. And I remember he asked me, well, how'd you get in here? And I told him and he kind of went white. So don't tell anybody that.
Oh, there's another, should I tell the going white story?
The
gun?
The gun? Oh, yeah. We both were there for that. How did it start?
Well, I was on the air in the morning. For some reason, I was doing a morning shift, and I remember riding from the I didn't have a car at the time, so I'd ride my bike from the N Street house through Capitol Park and go to the station to be on the air, followed by usually a breakfast at Jim Denny's. But I was on the air in the morning. Some of the staff was starting to kind of trickle in. The front office person was there.
I came in.
Marla, I think, was there. And so somebody you can walk past the front desk and look at the sliding glass doors into the control room. So more often than not, they were open unless things got busy out there, and then we could close it. I think it was open, so this guy walked in my control room. You know, even thinking it's just somebody that wants to see a real radio station, because I remember doing that at KXOA when I was in high school, and ooh, a real radio station. So it was exciting. He was there. He pulls a gun.
Ooh.
We owed him money or something?
He claimed we owed him some money. So, yeah, well, I don't remember what it looked like, because it was pulled on me. I was playing, and I either did the smartest thing I ever did or the really dumbest thing I ever did by getting up and just leaving the room. Left him in the control room, all by himself with his gun. So I was out front. Well, Marla was out there. We kind of figured out what we should do. Oh, okay, well, we should call the cops,
Well,
right?
before that, right when this is happening and he's looking at the gun, I'm walking right past the window and I saw that gun.
I didn't see that.
I didn't spend too much time deciding whether I should talk to these guys about their gun. I just headed straight for that fire escape window and I said to Marla, call the police or get out of here, and started going down the fire escape. The cops came.
First his friend came, or you said he was already there.
No, he was there with his friend. They were standing with each other. The cops came, and what we figured out, Robert and I said, they had a gun. They couldn't find a gun on this guy. We're thinking, how? Then they told us, when they came up the elevator,
The friend was going down there.
they were starting to frisk the friend, and somebody said, no, it's in there. And they let the friend go, who then got in the elevator, probably with the gun, and left. And so we kind of looked like fools down there, telling them that there was this big gun. And the police told me that if they'd seen me coming down the fire escape, having already gotten the call, they probably would have shot at me. So,
But the funny part of this was, while I was out in the front lobby and we were calling the cops, the record ends. It was on the air. So you know what a record sounds like. Those of you old enough to know what a record really sounds like. When it ends, you get that sound in the middle. And if you're in radio, dead air alerts you just very instantly. And so I'm not going back in there. So what happened was, we hear the needle get lifted up and brought back to the beginning of the record, and the same record played over. I still don't know who that guy was, or if we really
they
owed
let
him
him
money.
go. They let him go. We never saw him again.
Good.
Do you remember what record it was?
No, it was a 45.
The gun or the record?
Pardon?
The gun or the record?
I just saw a gun. I don't know guns, but it was a 45 because he didn't have any choice about what song to start. So that's how I remember it was a 45.
The importance of KZAP too. You were involved in another
Oh, there was.
news story. Willie Sutton. What was his? Who was the guy that you had?
I forget, but somebody was barricaded in a house, and the cops were there, and they were trying to get him out, and he was afraid the cops would kill him, and so he said, if I hear it on the radio, I'll come out, as long as I know I'm safe and other people know about it. So the cops made a phone call and said, okay, listen to KCRA. You know, they'll say something. He says, forget that. I want KZAP to See, our audience is really
That's
broad.
credibility right
We invite all kinds of listeners. So we got the call. I remember Barnford came in, and he was white, just pale, and described the situation, and I was on the air, and so I said something to the effect, and there's a tape of this somewhere, so I'm kind of stammering about the whole thing, but if you walk out of there, the cops won't hurt you. Everybody knows about it. It's on the radio now, so please throw your gun out and come out with your hands up, and the cops will not hurt you. So I'm realizing this is what I have to say. My song is ending. I have to do it right then. Of course, we didn't interrupt with breaking news in those days.
Record now.
So oddly enough, my biggest thought was, what could I play after that? That wouldn't incite or aggravate or anything like that. And I don't know which song it was, but I came up with something from the Grateful Dead. And he did surrender, and it was peaceful the whole time.
For Robert, I used to run into you all the time at the Starship shows down to San Francisco, whether Winterland. Can you expand on your relationship with?
Well, one of the things that, when I was in college, before I knew anybody in radio or any of that, I was an Airplane fan. So, to the extent that my mom knew who Grace Slick was. I mean, she was a fan because I'd keep talking about it and playing stuff and all that. And so I get into radio. Let me make sure my chronology is right. For years, I started my show with Get Together by the Airplane. Not the Youngbloods, but the Airplane. And there was this kid in Sacramento. And he was starting to make some noise with a band he was in called Steelwind. Jack Traylor was his teacher and the band leader. And so they were starting to do club stuff. We were promoting club stuff. I was going out to clubs. This was a good band, and he was a phenomenal guitar player. So Jack Traylor, I didn't know at the time, was old friends with Paul Kantner. Back in the folk days when it was Paul Kantner and David Freiberg and David Crosby and those people. So Craig came to the attention of Kantner and Slick through Jack, and got to the point where, because I was a friend of that band, I became a friend of what was the Disintegrating Airplane and the Evolving Starship. And for a kid that bought a record to end up having conversations with Grace Slick was pretty amazing to me. Sort of like when I was in high school, I bought the first Beau Brummels album, and later on turned into a friend of Sal Valentino's, playing live music on the air with him and some of the members of Stone Ground back in the day, to what he's doing now. So most of us, if not actual musicians, are kind of frustrated musicians. Certain of us were musicians. Charlie was.
Charlie,
is.
yeah.
So does that answer your question?
It's
It's
nice to see it like Winterland and
yeah.
places like that, and I know Craig also. So it's kind of like.
I hear he's playing locally. I heard an ad on the radio.
He was in Reno a month or so ago.
Well, this is
he
some
comes around.
vineyard
Yeah.
coming up soon. Anyway, so just another perk of being in radio, being forced to have conversations with these loony people that make beautiful music.
Bob, do you have any good interviews over the years that you can think of?
A lot of good ones, yeah. I go back to Bill Graham a lot.
Yeah.
'Cause I interviewed him 3 times over the years, and he's just get him going on a good day, and he's got the stories that just so amazing. I had some pretty exciting times working at KZAP. I think top of the list was going to Denmark, meeting the Rolling Stones, all 5 of them. Budweiser had sponsored this little radio junket for DJs. So we all met in Toronto from all these different cities in America. So now you've got a whole plane load of DJs headed to Europe to go see the Rolling Stones, not only in Denmark. The plan was we were going to follow them into Moscow, into Russia, because it was going to be their first time playing in Russia. And so we got to Denmark, and they put on a great show. It was amazing. Budweiser had set up this little hospitality tent out in front of what was like kind of a soccer field, kind of like Cal Expo, about that size. That's where the Stones were playing that night. And so they set up this little tent. We're having a barbecue, and there's free Budweiser, and everybody's having a good time. And these 2 really beat-up white Volkswagen buses, microbuses, pull up in front of the tent. The Stones get out of it. They walk in the tent. Hi, how you doing? How's everybody doing? Everybody having a good time? Okay, great. You want a picture? Okay, come on, everybody, picture. They stayed about 20 minutes, glad-handing everybody, said, okay, we got to get going because we got the show to do, in a little while. And then we all tripped over to the place and saw the Rolling Stones. But I thought, if I wasn't in radio, this moment would have never happened. It's like there's just got years of those different things going on.
Makes up for the modest pay.
Poignant moments was the Bill Graham Memorial in Golden Gate Park. We broadcast live, KZAP did, the whole day. That was pretty heavy, coming from San Francisco and growing up and going to the Fillmore and Winterland and all those shows when I was a kid was like, this was a big thing to lose Bill Graham like that. So, I'm sure I could think of 100 more. Grammy Week in New York, where you meet everybody. I mean, they put up all these DJs up in a whole suite of floors, and they set up your little booths, stations from literally everywhere in the country. And here's KZAP, and the engineers had rigged it so we could broadcast back to our home cities. Okay, so they'd bring in these guys, whoever it was, Tony Bennett, whoever, and they'd start at the booth, and they'd sit down for each 5 minutes and whatever. I mean, that was a great day. I mean, when you can interview Tony Bennett and Sean Colvin and Gilbert Gottfried and Dr. Ruth Westheimer, and honest to God, all within just a couple of hours. That's again, radio. It's one of those things that was pretty cool. Going to broadcasting from Austria was really fun. This is back in the days when radio stations would do these kinds of things. They don't happen anymore like this. For monetary reasons or whatever, they've chosen to put the money in other places. Their website, God knows where. But, that's really what radio used to really be, a real, human touch kind of thing going on. And it's just, those trips don't happen anymore. Those things don't happen anymore. Too bad. Because it was, the party was really raging there for a while, but all good things come to an end, I guess.
Any more questions? Oh, lots of them. Yes, sir.
We used to use KZAP as the soundtrack for the house parties in the early days, and I wanted to ask you about this. If you remember anything happening? There was a night where Taj Mahal's album had come out, and it was brand new, and the guy had introduced it, put it on, and start off 6 days on the road.
Mhm.
And you start off on 6 days on the road, am I baby? 6 days on the road,
Oh,
am I
I
baby?
Oh.
6 days on the road, and it went on and on, and it really
It's a double
cemented
album, huh?
the station's reputation is still in
That's
the
a
game.
double album.
Yeah. John Scott.
I love
Who
that
did
record.
that?
People
Great
that were at that
record.
party talk about it today.
Usually if it
Anything
skips
story
at the
behind
beginning,
that,
we
or-
should.
I wasn't there then. I wasn't there
Yeah.
then.
When did that?
Usually.
You're talking about the double album.
Yeah, take a giant
Yeah, that would have been early
It
on.
went on for like maybe, depending on who you talk to, from 5 to 50 minutes.
Put it on and just left the room. Left the
Yeah.
room.
And that one verse.
Don't remember that.
Well, lots of things used to happen in the control room.
None of them official.
That you don't know.
The control room was great up at the Elks Temple because there was a door to a little tiny balcony out there, so we could actually go outside. We couldn't go anywhere. It was just this little square, but it was outside, and it was outside, right outside the control room. So if ventilation was any kind of an issue, you stepped outside.
13th
Thank
floor.
On
you.
the 13th floor. Oh,
Wow. Actually, didn't one of the first graphic things from KZAP say high above
Yes.
Sacramento?
Do I have that?
It did. Robert might have that one here.
Is that?
No, that says freeform radio,
No.
but one of them says high above Sacramento. And I don't know how many people know this, but we, to get to work, here's all these people mostly with long hair and whatever clothes. We went to the Elks building, and we had to go through people that were very conservative and would just as soon leave us on the first floor than take us to work.
Those are the elevator operators.
Those are the elevator operators.
The only way to get to work.
It was really, well, they'd eventually get used to all of us, but they hated the people that came to visit us. So
Yeah.
it was a very strange way to go to work.
Especially the artists that would come up for interviews, because they were artists, and so they were all over the place. But a lot of people did come up.
Jake, the elevator operator.
Jake, the elevator operator.
And if he didn't like his passengers, he would go up and down to all the other floors for a while. And eventually, you'd get off at the 13th floor.
What were the years that you were in the Elks building?
Well, from the beginning,
68
68 through 73, I think, we moved to the corner of
Ninth
9th and J.
Across from Plaza Park.
Yeah,
Gallo Park?
Right.
Wino Park?
Wino Park. Yeah.
right next to right above a finishing school that had died earlier, and next to a porno movie theater and a really good deli.
Deli, yeah, that was a great
That
deli.
deli was the source of a lot of free meals from record promoters that would drop by.
Remember
Talk up their
what
product.
the elevator smelled like, though? It was bad.
It was one of those
They had like
elevators.
homeless people and stuff living in the elevator. They did. There was nobody on the first floor, really, and nobody on the second floor.
Oh, that
The
was-
station was on the third floor, 9th and J. Which is
Oh.
kind of cool, because you look out the window and you're looking
Yeah.
at J Street there, and it's kind of neat to be at a radio station where you're playing music and you're watching the traffic go by, and, you actually have a window to the world. Now I'm in a cave.
Yeah.
I didn't ever know that
I mean-
elevator worked.
Well, people were living in
Ran
it.
up the stairs. Oh,
No, it didn't
Maybe
work.
that
I
was
think
it.
that's the big thing.
Push
yeah.
the button and it would never
And you'd
stop.
step over bodies on the way up the stairs.
Patricia Stevens Finishing School.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. The awning was still out in
Finished
front.
all right. all-
So you tell people where the station was, just look
that's
for
right.
Patricia
Patricia
Stevens
Stevens,
Finishing
right.
School and go in those doors.
You had the balconies over there too.
Up there, yeah, very tiny balconies, enough to lean out, but that was just right on the street there.
Those were,
The Elks Temple was 13 floors
those
up,
were
so
fire
it was a little more.
escapes.
Yeah,
Because one night I was working by myself, it was a night shift. I put on a Frank Zappa record and I had to go to the bathroom, and when I was done in the bathroom, I realized that my keys to get back in were in the control room. And so I went out to a fire escape, and it's a Saturday night, and I'm breaking the window, and people on the street are yelling, "Hey, what are you doing up there?" And I'm trying to get back to my show. I think I got there just in time. The record had gone all the way through the side of the album and was just about ready to go into the run-out groove, and I saved it. And then I had to explain to the bosses on Monday why the window was broken. I always keep my keys with me now.
but that was the featured album for the night.
Yeah.
Isn't that a recurring dream of every disc jockey?
Yes.
It's a nightmare. It's like
Done that?
the record's running out and you're not in the
You
room.
can't
You're locked
get to
out.
it.
Something's wrong.
You can't
I
find
mean, this is
the
a
right
this is a
record.
universal dream among people who have to
I
do
never
this.
talked to anybody about that, but that's happened to me. It's like,
I've had that.
I know what I want to play and I can't find it, or I can't think of what to play. And if you saw pictures of what the radio station was, you're surrounded by a record library, so anything was within arm's reach. I didn't know anybody else had that.
But my
dream.
It's pretty
variation-
common, it turns out, yeah.
My variation is I can't find the records. I'm
Yeah,
on the air, it's a station.
He's also now with rock and roll radio.
Rock and radio.
He was and next to him is Robert Williams. Robert was the program director from 1969 to 79. Is that correct?
no, I was there 69 through 79.
Sorry.
Program director 75 through 79.
Okay. And Jeff Hughson in the center. Jeff was actually there on day one and fulfilled many roles, including program director and promotions director.
Promotions director and music director.
Music director.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Before day one.
Bob Keller, you may not recognize him, but you'll certainly recognize his voice. He has been radio survivor. He's currently on the Eagle, but he was on KZAP radio from 81 to 92, which we were both sort of amazed at. We
Yeah.
looked at it. And so we're just going to let this go, and I think the plan is to kind of let them all talk about their experience there, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. And with that, Dennis, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Why are we?
Okay.
No, I just want to get things started. I'm going to try and back out as much as I can, because these guys all spent either more time or more important time than I was there. But
No.
first of all, I want to thank my friend Peter Keat for putting these on. Peter wanted me to remind you that the doors will remain locked until everybody buys at least one book. Good, there's one. Gary's got one already. Tonight, Jeff is going to talk a little bit about the culture, the radio culture in Sacramento before FM really started to become a factor, and he was there from day one. Robert, as you know, filled in some space in between, and Bob took it out to the end. So the whole spread is covered here, and I'm sure each one of them can talk for 5 or 10 minutes. We'll throw in a few more stories, and then question and answers. So maybe a few where are they nows, but we don't want to get bogged down in that. And let's get started. Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Sacramento was like?
Well, before Well, let's say this. When they invented FM radio, 50, 60 years ago now, to get an AM license, you were forced to take an FM dial position. And then you could just broadcast your AM format on AM and FM. And that lasted up until the early or middle 60s. When the FCC ruled you can no longer broadcast the same format on AM and FM. Your FM programming had to be new and original programming. So we came along just after the first few years of people starting FM stations, and FM was hard to get, it was hard to receive because it's a higher quality signal, harder to get, and no one wanted it until the middle 60s. So, in Sacramento we had the King, KROI, Johnny Hyde, the Gear Hour. I mean, it was top 40. The Gear Hour was a little bit progressive. It wasn't the top 40 format, but they were screaming and they were hitting the jingles and coming on strong, and they were doing that. And then we had KXOA doing a similar thing. And KZAP was born out of an idea sort of originated by Tom Donahue after Larry Miller. But Tom Donahue had this idea one night. He was sitting around playing records with his friends, and he said, wouldn't it be great to have a radio station where you just sit around and play records for your friends? And so that's where this format of freeform radio began. Yeah. And get paid $185 a month to do it.
If the check didn't bounce.
Yeah. And so Donahue took over KMPX, where Larry Miller had begun progressive format, and really was considered he's the big daddy, Tom Donahue, so he's considered the big daddy of progressive radio. But the thing about KZAP is that we were even freer than KMPX or KSAN. The disc jockeys in the first year or two of KZAP, you could play anything you felt like playing at any time. If you wanted to make a setup of Stravinsky, Buck Owens, Count Basie, and the Airplane, have at it. The challenge always was to make it flow, to just have that wonderful musical flow. I call it the days when the segue was king. But that's what the talent was. That's what the art was. And so we came on the air November 8th, 1968, at 6 a.m. in the morning. After having the staff, with hammers and nails, we built the station. And we came on the air. And the first few months, we were on 20 hours a day. And we would start the day at 6 a.m. with Cristo Redemptor by Harvey Mandel. But the first day, the first thing that everyone over the air at KZAP was a tape that I made, because we decided the day before this is what we wanted to say, this is who we are. And that year, Jose Feliciano had done a controversial arrangement of the Star Spangled Banner at a ball game, and it was like, he did his typical intense way, and no one had ever done anything other than straight traditional arrangement. So it was very controversial, a big thing, and RCA put out on a promotional single. I don't know if it ever was released commercially. So we decided that we would start off with Jose Feliciano with the Star Spangled Banner going into the Beatles 45 of Revolution. Not the LP cut where they say, when it comes to Revolution, count me in or out, but the 45 where it says, when it comes to Revolution, count me in. So that's how we wanted to announce our presence in Sacramento, which we did. And the first air staff was Ed Fitzgerald, general manager, 6 to 10. Paul Merriam, first program director, 10 to 2. Freddie Gaines, from 2 to 6. Don't tell me I'm going to do that.
When was Weiss?
Charlie?
Oh, yeah, Charlie Weiss from 6 to 10, and me from 10 to 2. And it was the greatest thing ever. It was a real community. We used to, on the air, always refer to it as the KZAP community, and it really was a community. You go around town to merchants or just, interacting with people, and it was like a family. It was like a family, and we were free to say and do whatever we wanted to. We got into some trouble on political stuff. John Misterly about had a cardiac trying to kill us off, John used to get drunk at lunch and call us up saying, I know you're smoking pot down there. I can tell it on the radio. And we say, have another drink, John. And we'd had a big deal during the Folsom prison strike. On Sunday nights, we would read letters from the inmates saying whatever they wanted to say, and the prison management hierarchy accused us of conveying messages. Well, I don't know, we just read the letters, I don't know. But we were very political, and of course, anti-war stuff was big, and we used to do personal stuff. You lose your dog, call KZAP. Oh, I lost this little dog around 20th and K, little German Shepherd or whatever it was, Chihuahua, whatever you lost. You just call up KZAP. We'd announce it over the radio. Or if you needed a ride somewhere. I want to go to San Francisco today. Okay, if you're going to San Francisco, we'd either say, call Bob at this number, or we'd say, Carol's going to be down at 16th and W at the on-ramp there. If you're going to San Francisco, pick her up, But the great thing was about the musical freedom. And, of course, in the early days, we didn't have very many commercials. And I remember one of the big scores we made was after about a few months, we nailed Tower Records. They bought a $10,000 contract, $1 per commercial. So, they nailed us too. But we had them on. And Dennis had asked me to talk about putting the library together, because I was the first music director. And that came about, I called up Big Daddy. I said, Tom, we're starting this FM station down here. We had been talking about starting it. And I said, I want to know, how do you organize a record library? So I went down there and he showed me, well, Jeff, it's alphabetical and chronological. So, okay, let me write that down. And but he also turned me on to color coding. Country was green, blues were blue, so you could look and know what kind of music it was. And putting the library together, we had to solicit current material from the radio station, from the record labels. And some were good about it, and some it took them a while until, once we went on the air for a few months, we had a huge audience. But Russ Solomon, as he contributes to almost anything good that happened during the last 50 years, he helped a lot putting the library together. I don't know if it was directed from Russ, but there were several employees at different stores where I think Charlie had the best connections, and I had some. You go in and you get a stack of records. Oh man, we need these for the library. Okay, just take them. But it grew to be a wonderful library because everyone who was involved from day one to the end knew their music. You had to know the history of the music to be there, and people would bring in records or say, hey, we got to have this, we got to try that, and we had everything. I mean, we had classical, we had raga music, like India, Ravi Shankar, and Buck Owens, and early rock and roll and 60s rock and roll, and records that came out on small labels. We had it all. I just think of Jeff Jason, Friendly Neighborhood Narco Agent. He put that out on his own label out of Frisco, and we picked it up. And we played that a lot.
Well, people respected that library too. Records didn't turn up missing, but I do remember a story, maybe you can back this up, that Kenny Wardell got tired of requests for Grand Funk Railroad. And I think the entire Grand Funk Railroad collection was broken over his knee and put back in the library. So
that was the other side of being able to play whatever you wanted to play. You didn't have to play anything you didn't want to play. And we would just tell people, oh, we don't play that. Listen to Croy. Taxi by Harry Chapin. Listen to Croy. We don't play that. So it was pretty cool. It was wonderful. It was, and we did concerts in the park that I organized. And the thing I love about KZAP, the music, and the community. All the people on either side of the microphone. It was just a wonderful life experience.
Robert showed up about a year after it started, and you were over at KERS before that, weren't you?
Yes.
Sac State.
Yeah. I had been going to Foothill College in the Bay Area near Palo Alto, and was listening to KMPX and KSAN, and thought, I like music, so why couldn't, just like kids nowadays, they think, oh, I can become an NBA star and just go do it. Well, I thought I could go do radio in San Francisco, so I tried to transfer from San Francisco, Foothill to San Francisco State, thinking that I'd be closer, so that would help. They were full. I ended up at Sac State living with my parents, thinking that would only be for one semester, and that was the fall of '68. So KZAP was going on the air. KERS was on the air at Sac State, and I fell in with a group of people, most of whom ended up at KZAP.
Ace Young and Kenny Wardell and Charlie.
Tasha, Zoe,
Oh,
all these old names that are flooding back. So I was getting involved in radio, even though it was college radio. KZAP was on the air, so I was hanging out up there, up at the Elks Temple. One thing you got to remember is people our age, and I think this is important, especially if any of you are our age. Think of when you grew up. Jackson Browne has constantly been my goalpost in terms of remembering what was going on when. So in 65, I was 17, and you think about what was going on then. The British invasion was full tilt. And the Beach Boys were going. We were listening to brand new Stones, brand new Beatles, brand new Motown, brand new Phil Spector. And within a couple of years, think of what was coming out of San Francisco, especially, and LA, and New York, and London. So that takes you up to 67, and 68, it was just the perfect time for KZAP to become what it became. So 1 year after they were on the air and I was bugging them to get on the air, my friend Ken Wardell was already on the air by just a little bit of time ahead of me. And the first birthday comes around, and it's a Grateful Dead concert. And everybody wanted to go to the Grateful Dead concert. Nobody wanted to be on the air. So I wanted to go to the Grateful Dead concert too, but I saw that as an opportunity to be put my foot in the door. I did, and I was around ever since. So I filled in. I ended up, I think, with a weekend shift. Jeff's memory is a lot more specific than mine is about stuff. Ken left to work for RCA Records, and I became music director, I think, in 72, something like that. You don't know.
Yeah, it was, because that's when I got there.
Jeff touched on it. Tom Donahue, a hero of mine. I remember at Foothill once listening to KMPX, wanting to make a request, so I call up the request line. He answers the phone. If any of you know what his voice is like, there is no mistaking. It was him. So I get completely tongue-tied, made some lame request. Later on, was in a position to actually get to know him, work with him some. One of my favorite memories is while I was working at KZAP, I was partying with some of the KSAN people down there, and the overnight guy called in sick, and I happened to be with the program director. So he looks at me and says, "You want to go on the air?" Sure. And that night, Tom Donahue introduced me.
Ooh,
And that was, I have it on tape somewhere in the boxes of things. But that was part of the beauty of where KZAP was, in Sacramento, close to the Bay Area. You know what was going on in San Francisco. The Fillmore was still going on. Bill Graham was interacting with us. Tom Donahue was interacting with us. We were far enough away not to be competitive. So it made it easy for them to help us without any kind of risk of any of that competition stuff. So we did work together in a number of ways.
Can I mention?
Yes.
You know, talking about Big Daddy and cooperation, one of the things he would do, because he was Big Daddy, I mean, Tom Donahue started off in 56 in Cleveland, or somewhere back there. So, I mean, he was a big guy in the industry. So he would get tapes of albums 3 weeks before they came out, the new Rolling Stones, the new band album, whatever. Mm-hmm. So he'd get these tapes and he'd call me up, and I would drive down there on a reel-to-reel player, and we'd make a dub so that we could play the album 3 weeks before it came out. That was Big Daddy.
Yeah, he got direct from Jagger. I heard Brown Sugar and allowed us to copy it and play it. And they were doing an exclusive thing there, and we could do it here, and it was not interfering with each other at all.
They did simulcasts too, where they had the live concert, and a couple of times it was rebroadcast at KZAP, which was kind of cool.
One of the things KZAP did was live music.
When you, after
Early on, Jeff was still there.
Oh, yeah.
Up on the 14th
more
floor.
Yeah, the 14th floor.
Yeah.
But that was more like 69, 70, wasn't it? Yeah.
70, 71, somewhere in there.
Now, the underground freeform era lasted that way, I think, until about the time I got there. And I remember one of the first meetings I went to, the owner who had inherited some money, asked us if we would forego our paychecks again. And I was told, no, don't say no, say no. So we all said no, and how long after that did he commit suicide?
Well, but it was over a girlfriend.
Oh, was it? Yeah, but I knew that. No, it wasn't the reason for that.
Unless you want to
But it was shortly after that. No, but I knew it was a girlfriend, but it was shortly after that.
Coincidentally, it was about 6 weeks after that.
Right.
And Kenny Wardell wrote on the elevator door, "Lee, we won't be fooled again." But he was a troubled guy, he was a rich
Yeah,
kid,
he was.
and he had a bad, nasty breakup, and he did commit suicide.
What I was saying, though, is you throw that in on top of the fact that we weren't getting paid and asked, so then we got taken over by his aunt,
Yeah.
who didn't want to spend a dime on the station. And that was a very strange year. We were still in the Elks Temple.
She's the one that hired John Williams, right?
She hired John Williams, who hired me, and looking back at it, I think he hired me because he thought I was gay.
Yeah. He was trying to hit
But
on
his
you.
only really positive move for this station, getting Dennis involved.
We had the worst series of general managers ever. My favorite was
Sherman Rainey.
Sherman Rainius, who did a Sunday night show called A Rosicrucian Speaks.
He wore a cape when he did it, didn't he?
I think he did. There was crystal balls or something. I don't know.
But it was kind of a strange time then, because they didn't want to put any money into it. The equipment was falling apart. We had the rug was curled up, and we would sweep it once in a while, and it was just it was horrible up there, but we didn't care. And then they put the station up for sale, and as I remember, it went for, was it $100,100?
I don't know.
Something ridiculous like that.
It was put on the air for $65,000
Well,
originally.
so there was a little appreciation.
A little bit, but then
it was-
down the line.
It was bought by two guys that worked in R&D in Cincinnati for Procter & Gamble that wanted to run a radio station, and one of their father-in-law had a lot of money. So they came into town, moved us, hired Don Early, who started selling time. We actually started making regular paychecks.
The paycheck story, I tell this, it's true. We were all paid, oddly enough. We were paid, not much, but we were paid. And so when payday rolled around, the bank that they used was about a block and a half away from the Elks Temple. And so the people that got their check first got their check cashed. If anybody wasn't around when they were distributed or came in a little bit late, they may not get it cashed, depending on whether or not how aggressive the sales department had been that week to hit up the people that owe us money to actually get the money. So it had that much of a hand-to-mouth kind of thing. But many of us lived together.
Yeah, on N Street, there were 6 of us that lived in one house, yeah.
Or more.
Or more.
And
that rotated.
And then there was a few people at the Big Deal Farm too, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
There was a country
17.
commune right where Sunrise Mall is now that had Jesse and a few other people out there.
Robin. Well, Robin wasn't ever on the air, his wife. Can I tell a great?
Sure.
We're talking about revenue and advertising, and we would have these weekly staff meetings. Everyone was allowed to come. Everyone had an equal voice. The engineer, the secretary, volunteer. I mean, not only about volunteers, but I mean, we'd sit in this living room on N Street, 30 people, and they would go on for hours and hours and hours because everyone had equal voice. But I remember early on, it was probably, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 months into the KZAP, and they had hired a new young ad salesman, and he comes to this meeting, and he kind of waits, for his moment.
Is that Paul?
I don't know if it was Paul. I can't picture who it was.
Okay.
Could have been Paul, but he waits for his moment, and he goes, "I've got some good news," and he says, "I just signed a contract for advertising with Bank of America," and unanimously throughout the whole room, "No fucking way! No fucking way! We're not going to advertise Bank of America." And it was like his first big contract, But everyone immediately reacted the same way, and he had to go back to Bank of America and say, "I'm sorry, they won't run ads for you."
Actually, that came up, I think, later again as well, when Bank of America was approached, or they approached us or something. We were getting some credibility, and there was that debate. Do we take their money? It ultimately worked out because there was a certain amount of practicality that we did see through this fog of politics that was going on at the time. We decided to take their money and say that they're sponsoring our news and say what we know as the news, as the truth, which many times went against the corporate America that they represented. So that's another side to that.
The first time we turned them down was right after they burnt down the B of A in Chula Vista. So that's what was in the air.
We can backtrack, but I want to move forward so we can let Bob talk a bit about basically, which was the bulk of KZAP's existence. Bob got there. When did you get there, Bob?
Got there in 1981.
81. So there was a short gap when
Rode it
none of
right
us
into
were
the
there.
grave until about 92, I think it was.
So, yeah, well, it's 91, I think it was, January. So you were there for 10 years.
11 years.
What was it like when you got there? Because I know by then everybody had consultants and there was a new ownership.
It had nothing to do with the radio you just heard described by these guys.
But you had...
It was a corporate entity. It was a for-profit business. It was not the community campfire, good vibe thing, everybody play what you want to play kind of deal. Interestingly enough, as Jeff was going through his little thing about the history of KZAP and all that, and the atmosphere of the times, that was actually a parallel evolution going on all over the country right around that time in cities like Chicago with XRT and Cleveland MMS and Boston BCN and the list goes on down south, the Mighty Met in Los Angeles. All these radio stations were coming to an awareness, trying to be part of a community that was starting to evolve, which we call the revolution, which we call the baby boom, which whatever you want to call it. Let's face it, we all at about the same time figured out we have kind of our own way of doing it now. This is a new generation, and we have some new things going on. We want to hear our music. We want to hear our political stuff. So it was going on. And it was also going on in Miami, where I was at the time at WBUS. You can draw an exact parallel line to the music, the politics. When they had the Republican National Convention down there, 1972, whenever that was, I think, when I was working at a radio station. Pardon me? It was Democrat, okay, whatever. Who knew? We were so stoned. But and I was working at WBUS, the Magic Bus on Miami Beach, which was exactly as you described. It was a situation where the guy owned an AM and an FM, and the FM was a business station, WBUS, so we took it over as the Magic Bus, but there you had it. And Abby Hoffman was in the room with us, and it was all going on at the same time. And so my point is this was all going on, and we all kind of came from the same place. The difference is I stayed on it long enough for where the corporate train stopped and I got on board, there too. I mean, I haven't had a break. This is my 42nd year of continuous radio. On Friday, this tax day, the 15th, was actually to the day my 30th day in Sacramento radio. In fact,
yes.
I got a nice little resolution from the Senate. Darrell Steinberg signed the thing. It was very cool. No regrets, but interestingly enough, the radio that these guys were describing, I was also heavily immersed in it. I'm born in San Francisco, second generation San Franciscan, so I was obviously aware of the roots of where this revolution came from and all, and that was a really good time, but you know what? There is no way that paradigm could go on, and we can pay off our mortgages or any of the stuff that goes along with it. So you make a choice in life. It's a really interesting, hip hobby that you're into, or this is how you're going to make your living, and so get serious and go with the guys with the money. It usually means moving to a place where a radio station the size of the Eagle, where I work, can be supported. There's enough of people, there's enough of revenue, there's enough of things going on, so you can make a living. The trick for me has always been to carry what you guys described with me on into modern times, as much as you can of the attitude and not buy into too much of the BS that's out there. So some stations allow you to do that more than others. I've been lucky. The Eagle's been a great radio station. KZAP 11 years, the Eagle 15 years. I worked a couple of years at the Point. I think Sacramento in general is a really good radio market, and I think the people who live here know that, and I think it's all starts with the seed that you guys planted a long time ago.
Well, I think when you open the mic, it's not much different than what they were describing. I think it's just that you're not playing whatever records you pick out.
Yeah, well, there's a whole different kind of a thing. And I'll tell you the truth, of radio right now is like everything else. It's all going to the digital ether. It's really not even about radio anymore. In fact, lots of people listen to the radio, don't use the radio when they listen to the radio. They listen on their phone or their computer or whatever. So there's a whole different thing, and it's been a real kind of an interesting challenge for me to make the crossover, being of this generation. I mean, January I turned 65, so this is probably the last year. So I'm going to try to still have as much fun as I can every day.
Bob, what was it like when they decided to jump on the latest bandwagon, which was country music in '91?
I was out of the country at the time KZAP died, unfortunately. I was on a 10-day vacation in the Caribbean, and I was having the greatest time ever. And after about a week down in St. John, I thought I'd call back to KZAP and see what's going on, just to check in, say, hey, how's everything? Cool. And they put me on hold, and I'm hearing country music. I'm going, this is not a good sign. So I asked to speak to the program director, Chris Miller, and who's been the program director at KZAP 3 different times over the years. But so I go, Chris, what's going on? And he's going, I think you better come back pretty soon. I said, it sounds like I don't need to come back anytime soon. He said, well, they've changed the format. And I said, what? And he goes, they've changed it to country. And I thought there, and I'm on a payphone at a pizza place in St. John, and I can't believe the station I've been at for 11 years just went country. And my first question was, what country? What are you talking about? Country and Western? No. So anyway, that was that, and I said, should I even come back? And he goes, you're the only guy here under contract, you have to come back. So I did. After my vacation, I came back, and they gave me a choice of either staying on and playing country music or taking a chunk of money and just calling it a day, which is what I did. And but it was pretty cool. It was 11 years at KZAP, and when I first got to town, I didn't know much about KZAP. I was working in the Midwest in Madison, and I took the job here because I figured I'd launch myself back into the Bay Area, where I'm from originally. But I got as far as Sacramento, and I just stayed because I liked it here. But I didn't know much about KZAP, so my second day in town, I'm at a restaurant, and I'm with some people from the station, and we're talking, and the waitress is saying, hey, what do you know? And I said, well, I just moved here. I start Monday at a radio station. KZAP? I said, or KZAP, I said. And she went, oh, whew, that's like the coolest station. And her friend, another waitress in the restaurant, went, oh, absolutely. KZAP? Are you kidding? Man, that's just insanely a great station. And I mean, so I already had a leg up. When I got here, it was an established, wonderful radio station that everybody loved, even with the little corporate takeover thing. I mean, there was a lot going for it, so I landed in a great spot. I'm happy it worked out the way it did, that's for sure. Nice t-shirt back there, by the way, man in the white bug.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful
Cafe
one.
Rock. That's something that Bob started on KZAP, which is, it had, a vibe and a personality from the early days of KZAP, and you've carried it through to all your stations.
Yep.
How many years have you been doing Cafe Rock?
Since I got here,
30
about,
years.
30 years.
And it's a nice little respite in the middle of the day.
Well, for a long time, Sacramento had KZAP, and it was very lucky to have KZAP. Now, we're really lucky to still have Keller on the air.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
When are you going to put cream of washroom soup back on the menu?
That didn't go over that well. You like our pork in a shoe, though. That's really good.
We could start with questions, I guess, and that might lead to some other stories. Anybody out there been wanting to ask any questions about any eras or specific people? You back there?
I think probably everybody in this room knows where they were when KZAP went country. Kennedy assassination.
I was out of the country, I think.
We were coming back from Yosemite with our kids, and got back late at night. I got to go to work, turned my radio on. That's my 65 Mustang out there with the KZAP sticker on the bumper. And headed down the road, and country was playing. I thought, old radio, jiggle up down a little bit, the dial. Kept coming back. I said, what the hell's going on? And there it was, just like that, just overnight. I thought I'd fallen through a hole in the earth somewhere.
You want to know the irony of this whole thing was right before I went on vacation, Weidel, our general manager,
The guy that fired me.
and everybody else, had a party. It was the Christmas party, the Christmas before they blew the station up. They knew then it was going to happen. And he had the Christmas party, and a theme was Western, wear cowboy hats and do that. We're going along with it. The boss wants it, sure, So we're showing up in like cowboy hats and stuff. And I have pictures at home of that Christmas party, and I look at it, I just want to retch when I see it, because I'm going, what a sick joke, He knew that far ahead of time, so.
At the other end of that scale, we knew this company, I forget the name, who are they?
New Day? Oh,
No.
Nationwide? No.
Weidl's
Company.
Yeah, whatever. When
Western
Weidel
cities.
bought-
Twin
Western
Cities.
cities.
Western, whatever, because they fired me. This guy, we knew he was the general manager. He was hanging around the radio station for a couple of months. We had our 10th birthday party that November in '78. He was telling all of us, we at this corporation really love KZAP. We don't want to make any changes. We really are going to support what's going on. We're just going to continue it. So he was at that party where Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes played for us.
Sure.
And just as a side note, as Johnny was getting back on stage to do an encore, he slipped and fell on a wine glass and slashed his wrist and was in the hospital here in Sacramento for a week or so after that.
Yeah.
But the party went on.
It was a good party, too.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was extremely good. New Year's Eve was shortly after that. I partied that New Year's Eve. I did my show, I think it was New Year's Day, and I had a little bit of a headache. The next business day, the first business day of '79, Weidel comes in and fires me. And within about 2 weeks, most of the people I had hired, because I was program director then, or had worked with for a long time, were gone. And so that was that transition. And then a couple of years later, you came in, so you weren't a part of the waiting in the wings crowd.
No, they just hired me on the strength of a tape I'd sent from the Midwest, and actually they said it when they hired me. They go, "You're on a 2-week kind of a trial run," and I thought, this is strange. Okay, so my wife and everybody's still back in Madison, and I said, "Don't pack anything yet. Just let's see how this thing goes." So after a couple of weeks, I said, "Look, this is great. I mean, I'm back in Northern California. This is really where I want to be. So I hope it works out. Or we hope it works out too." What do you mean you hope it works out? Make it work out for me, for crying out loud. So they did. I mean, it all did work out. But they originally hired me for mornings, which is the high-profile, high-paying slot, And I did that for a little while, and then they hired someone else for the mornings, and they moved me to middays, which was the best thing that ever happened, so it's a great place to be. And that's where I've been literally for, almost 30 years now. But I'll tell you, it was so much fun to walk into a radio station that had such a great reputation from the get-go. It seemed like I'd always been working at stations where you're trying to claw your way to some credibility, and there's KZAP, just come on in.
Yeah.
We're already here.
Join the family.
Yeah.